Good evening and welcome to Plain Talk. This is our first program for the year 2017, and I want to take this opportunity, first of all, to thank Channel 9, its owners, operators, Channel 7, owners and operators, and you, the viewers, for the great support and encouragement from last year. It's going to be another very interesting year. I do apologize, we had some breaks. It hasn't always been easy to get people to come on this program, but we wouldn't start by complaining this year. In fact, I want to move immediately to introduce our guests on this program. First for 2017, Ms. Gail Teixeira, long-standing member of the People's Progressive Party, served for a very, very long time as Dr. Jagan's personal assistant, I believe, and Bishop Juan Edgill, Member of Parliament, and who has been very prominent in the recent debate over the 2017 budget. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Plain Talk, and it's really a great pleasure.
Thank you for having us, and good evening and Happy New Year to your viewers.
Good evening, everybody.
Your party, People's Progressive Party, Civic, had been in power for roughly 23 years.
Yes.
It then lost the elections. What has that transition been like, moving from dominant, despite what we call one-seat majority, which we still have now, I hasten to add, moving from that position where you have that leverage over executive and state power to now where you sit on the opposition?
Well, first of all, I think I must say, Chris, that we don't accept that we were defeated. We have an election petition, and therefore we felt we were cheated, and one of the indicators of that is that the difference between the government and ourselves is the difference of approximately 4,500 voters, less than 1%.
Yes.
Difference between us, and in most countries, democratic countries, that would be cause for recount. That did not happen, and then less than a year later, we have local government elections, and we win about 65% of the local authorities and 30,000 votes more than the sitting government. We also control 7 of the 10 RDCs. So I think that has that particular issue, when the word defeat is used, I don't think we feel defeated, and therefore, yes, we've gone through a transition, but we've had a long history of being in opposition. We've been in opposition for 28 years, came back and won a major majority in 92 with the restoration of democracy, and we're in opposition, and we believe that we're a formidable opposition. We know this thing well. We've had even though some of the younger ones, like myself in those days, we've experienced that. We know about opposition politics. We know about and we have the advantage of being in government, and so we also understand how government works and how it should work, and many of the laws are those laws we brought in.
Yes.
So we have certain advantages, and I think that clearly our position is that when the government first came in was that we were willing, and we said very clearly, and it was in August 2015, the first day we went in, I think August 17, 2015, that we would not obstruct the government in anything that would improve the lives of our people and improve the betterment of our people and the progress of our country, that we weren't going to behave like they behaved when we were in government. And so we thought that maybe that because of the less than 1% difference, that the government would realize how fragile the crown on their head is, and they maybe want to engage more with the parliamentary opposition. That has not been the case in the last 19 months. So, but we feel very, very, some of the things we said on the platform in 2015, we feel vindicated. We warned the people what the AFC government would be like. There's no pleasure in being vindicated,
right.
However, there's no pleasure because it's hurting our people, it's hurting our country. But nevertheless, we weren't fooled by them. And so in an opposition, I think we are a formidable opposition, and we can be even more formidable as the time goes on.
Bishop? You're pretty new to UK. This is your first foray into politics, the 2011 elections?
2011, I served 2011 to 2015
Yes.
in government and now in opposition. I think it has given us an opportunity to let Guyana know how relevant the PPPC is, its agenda. I mean, one of the things that all Guyana can reflect on as we approach 2017 is our quest for reliable, renewable, clean, cheap electricity. Amalia, I played a very small role, I would say, but former President Dr. Barrett Jagdeo, even former President Donald Ramatar, engaging the entire opposition for us to be able to agree on that while we were in government to get it going. We have now come to a place where it was called criminal. It wasn't broad enough. Those were terms used in the National Assembly by various members of government to describe Amalia.
Members of then
Members of the APNU who are in government today.
As well as the FC, I believe.
And the FC.
Yeah.
Right? So now we have a report coming out of Norway, the Norconsult, and they have basically indicated, look, lift yourselves above political division, get consensus, get a new investor, give Guyana the dream of getting this whole renewable, reliable electricity program on the go, and Amalia seems to be the best option. Now, sitting in the opposition benches, having sat on the government benches and viewing what is taking place on that one single but yet very important issue for Guyana, indicates the transition that this country has gone through. And I think it's a big eye-opener because what we...
You say transition. Are you using it in a neutral term, positive or negative?
I would say neutral. Because it depends who's looking at it and which view is being offered. But let's see it as a transition. There were a lot of people out there that wanted to experiment with the newness and the call for change and the rest of it, who didn't believe in the sincerity of the agenda and the programs that we were seeking to promote, and we were overtaken by other considerations that the population wanted to discuss as against an agenda that brings Guyana to a higher place. But here we are in a situation where it grieves us that we are watching a slowdown economy, businesses almost to the grind. We've just come out of Christmas, which is supposed to be, if you don't make good business at Christmas, you can't make good business at all. Let's talk to the, not just Regent Street, but the Essequibo vendors, the Skeldon Market vendors, the Rose Hall Market vendors, New Amsterdam, Linden, and you will hear the cry of what is going on. Things are not the way it was supposed to be. But the promise was, we will make things better. What has happened? And for us sitting on the opposition benches and offering suggestions, offering cooperation, offering constructive criticism, and it is not being implemented, it is something that really pains. And I think we have sincerely offered responsible, mature political leadership and criticism. And in 2027, we will continue to do so. And like my colleague, Madam Gail Teixeira, indicated, our guiding principle is that we will not do anything that will obstruct development or rob the Guyanese people from development and progress and betterment. We will cooperate on any agenda that moves the country in that direction.
Quite a mouthful.
You're dealing with top politicians. What do you
Yes,
expect,
indeed,
Chris?
indeed. You raised this question of the election petition.
Yes.
Now, it's strange because an election petition ought to be heard expeditiously.
That's the whole intent, I think, of the law.
It's the law. It's
Yeah.
not only the intent, it is the law.
Yeah, exactly.
Why is it we have this dilatory attitude to it? And why is the PPPC, which claims it's been cheated, not acting with somewhat more vigor, determination, to get this matter brought to the courts.
Well, I mean, the matter is before the courts, and as far as I know, you would know much better than I do probably that Mr. Lowenfield, who's the chief elections officer, is the one who has, with his lawyers, tried to impede the petition being heard. And when Ian Chang ruled that the petition should proceed before his retirement, before he left office, the ruling of Chang has been again appealed. And so there are attempts to put obstacles in the way, legal, technical obstacles in the way of hearing the case. We had been having almost weekly protests in front of GCOM calling for Surge Valley's removal, and we've had protests outside
But
of the
that
courts
would
as
deal
well.
with the hearing of the election petition, though.
No. But at least it's our presence that, we've gone through this whole thing in court with matters in court where we let it be known that people have a voice as well. But the petition, the fact that petition has not been heard and it's over a year, there are other countries that have petitions that have had elections after us, had them heard and have proceeded. I mean, it's actually a travesty in Guyana, and I think that we continue to raise it wherever we go. We raise it at international levels. We raise it with the diplomatic corps. We raise it in the press. But I don't think there's any appetite, or does not appear to be an appetite of the GCOM nor of the court so far. I mean, don't want to castigate anybody who's in the court to really move this thing through. There's a lot of dilatory, procedures and attempts to slow it down, and times when the lawyers for the Lowenfield and or whoever are keep postponing, the usual tactic. So, but nevertheless, we become more and more vindicated. We are still doing what is required with the Surge Valley had announced that he was leaving, and we waited very patiently for Mr. Granger, the president, to send us a request according to Constitution. Not seeing anything coming, I then wrote Mr. Harmon saying, could you please advise us on what direction the president wants to go in? Does he want to meet informally first to work out the modus operandi, or does he want to, we're waiting because this was weeks before Surge Valley retired or resigned. And so finally we got the letter, and we've gone through the process and everything else like that. Whilst we are fighting, and we believe that we're justified in the petition, and we have a very good lawyer waiting on the side from Jamaica to represent us when the case is heard, who has, I think, had a lot of experience with election petitions in Commonwealth countries, that nevertheless we still have to deal with the problem of GCOM.
Reforms.
That's the reforms, and to prevent what happened the last time, which we have made very clearly, in our case when it's heard will show the level of tampering of the machinery that took place. So it wasn't the fraud of the old type of fraud, it was a lot of other tampering of the machinery. And so we believe very strongly that whilst we run on that track, we also have to run on the track of correcting, reforming, getting and influencing GCOM to be able to bring reforms that will make everyone in Guyana happy that you have a free and fair elections.
Well, one gets, I think, I probably reflect the view of a lot of civil society, that the appetite for reform and change tends to be on which side of the political aisle you really reside. The government never seems keen, whichever government.
But correct, no. But
constitutional reform,
Yeah.
Whichever type of reform.
But I'll say this, in 2008, when we were talking about the local government elections, I was present in the meeting with President Jack Dale and Mr. Corbyn. And when the whole issue came up at the local government elections, once again postponed. And Corbyn said very clearly, if you go for a local government election, you're going to postpone. And that is at that meeting, the decision was taken between the two gentlemen. I was there, Dr. Luncheon was there, that we want to have a mother of all registrations, house to house. That decision was made there. The diplomatic corps was called in. The PNC, I signed that agreement with Mr. Corbyn and Mr. Surge Valley, diplomatic corps and the human rights people and other people were there as witnesses. We went ahead with a house-to-house registration. And that was a key issue because the criticism of the PNC in the opposition, remember in the 90s, post-97 election, was about the list and the list and the list. So, okay, we were able to have a new house-to-house registration. And then you had continuous registration. The laws were amended, scrutineers being hired and paid to be in the centres, etc., etc. These all came out through negotiations, not necessarily within GCOM, outside of GCOM as the first entree. Then you had other legislation was made. The problem now is that with GCOM is that GCOM made a decision in August. So when you say, what are we doing? The track of the petition, the track in GCOM, that is that, look, we've had a list that's now 10 years old, almost. 208, this is what, 2017, it's almost 2 years old, 10 years old. But we have a voters list of 520,000. How do you get a voters list of 520,000 with a population of 747,000? Something wrong. And so
No, but is that it's not part because you can't take someone off.
No,
Somebody
you
has
can.
migrated, but you can't take their name off.
No, by
But
constitution.
in the issue of the continuous registration, and even when you're doing verification
verifying the
of the
people that
final
are
voters
physically.
list,
Yes.
if you don't locate the people, if you produce evidence that this person is dead because you have hospital reports and all the rest of it, GCOM has refused to take those people off the roll.
But the GRO, the Ghana Registry, what do you call it? GRO,
National
Registrar,
Revenue Office. Yeah.
is
The
expected.
General Registrar's
yeah,
Office.
yeah, General
Sorry.
Registrar is expected
To submit that
on
That's
information.
correct, yes.
the death certificates. And in fact, when you go to take a person's name off the list, that does not. You have to have the death certificate.
Certificate.
They will not accept the hospital
Yes.
registration of death. We had that experience over and over again. So yes, the list may be inflated in that way, but not to that extent of 520 odd thousand for 747,000. So in GCOM last year, we were successful with our new commissioners, with the government-appointed commissioners, with Dr. Suraj Valley, to agree that it's time for another house-to-house registration. Fabulous. And that it would start in post-mid 2017. So we would finish by 2018, 2019 is local government, 2020 national elections. GCOM put into their budget all the lamination, the cameras, the biometric things for your fingerprints. I'm not sure if they agreed to do the, what you call, the one with the iris, but definitely all that. And this would be a complete new house-to-house. And this was part of the discussion with Mr. Jagdeo and Corbyn, that this should be done every 10 years and stuff, like almost like a census. And so that was agreed. The constitutional budgets of constitutional agencies came to the House in November 28th, right? October. And lo and behold, GCOM's budget was cut by over $2 billion. And the entire amount, Chris, the entire amount
That's from the program.
is the capital program for the what you call equipment and stuff like that.
Yes.
And the other part is for the hiring. You know, when you do the house to house, you have all
Staff.
these enumerators, whatever you call them. Thousands of people have to be hired, boats, trucks, whatever you're going to do to go in the interior. All that's gone. When I said on the floor, Minister Jordan, is the government prepared to put back the money for the house-to-house registration in a supplementary? He looked at me very arrogantly, says, I will consider it. And that was the end of it. So I'm saying that when you're running on several tracks simultaneously, and a new house-to-house, I think, would give some confidence, and GCOM needs to have the confidence and trust of the Guyanese people, not just PPP supporters and PPP voters. It needs it for all Guyanese to feel, yeah, this thing is good. The biometrics, biometric house to house, if possible, with the eye, and then further on, maybe in time for 2019, the biometric, what do you call the
Electronic
voting.
With a
But
printout.
you can't have electronic voting without a new voters list.
Now, you may be right. Yeah, you probably are right in terms of the details.
Yes.
But the broader issue is this whole mechanism of GCOM, the whole structure. We all know that this was ought to have been a one-off. It was intended to be a one-off mechanism, the Carter Center model.
Yes.
And your party did nothing to, as far as the public may be aware, did nothing to act on that situation where what in fact you have the two major parties controlling the machinery. So isn't there a bigger problem? And maybe Bishop, you can say whether you don't think that is equally serious, that we have not dealt with the fundamental problem of the structure of GCOM and its functions.
I think where we're at, we must appreciate based upon where we came from. When the Carter model came, it's because of this massive fear that existed. And it was almost a known fact that elections were not free and fair, they were rigged, there was manipulation and all the rest of it. The control mechanism, we had to remove staff, the appointment, it was only a control of a department of the Ministry of Home Affairs and all the rest of it. We've got out of that into an independent commission, which really...
When was it? With 6 of the 7 commissioners being politically aligned.
But the chairman...
Only the chairman.
But the chairman is a casting vote on
Yes.
any... It's the most important vote, because even if you take party lines...
Well,
even if
he's
you
not
take-
just a casting vote. He could be the deciding vote because
Yeah, absolutely.
one of 7. Yes,
Yeah,
one of 7.
even if you take the party line, it is the chairman who comes through a process that is neither here nor there. It's supposed to be an independent voice that will rise to the occasion and do what is good for the country.
But my point is that was intended to be a
Yeah,
temporary mechanism.
That may be so.
Political
Let's-
dialogue has to be able
but
to
let's deal with
produce
history,
the new
though.
mechanism.
Let's deal with history. Yes, it is true. Carter Center thought it was a temporary thing. But in 1994, this was put into an act. It was legislated. And then when we had the constitutional reform process, 1999 to 2001, it became enshrined in the Constitution.
Yes.
Now, remember, the Constitutional Reform Commission was not a bipartisan body. It had representatives of
Civil
business
society.
and civil society and human rights and women and youth and lawyers and stuff like that. So that, yes, PVP and PNC they were key players in all
Yes.
of it. And I think it was Mr. Paris who was the coordinator, who was PNC, and Ralph was the chairman, who was PPP. And so there was maybe this division of labor in it, but certainly those changes could not have come about if the commission, and when you read all the documents, these were, in fact, the human rights section was really interesting because I was part of that group. Myself, Deborah Bakker, Mansour Nadir, and Gina Rose. We were the 4 with the Human Rights Task Force that did the human rights provisions. And you would not have believed that we came from different parties or we had this view. We made our recommendations, the commission looked at it, and then it went forward into the House, then to the drafters. So I'm just saying that, yes, you can say this was political parties involved, but the commission had the respectability of being much broader than the confines of the PPP.
So
and
are you
PNC.
suggesting then, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but are you suggesting that the PPP is comfortable with this structure?
I'll say very honestly to both the PVP and the PNC, and I can't speak for APNU, but PNC, for me, APNU is PNC, so I mean, I'll say it in that context. I think they're quite happy with it. The problem, though, Chris, I know this is a concern of yours, because you've raised it several times, even publicly and in writings and stuff. This may have concerns for certain people. However, the real concern of the majority of Guyanese, and for us in the PPP, is the fact that the machinery, now the commission is supposed to run the secretariat. Do you know that the secretariat runs the commission? And that a lot of the work that the commission should be addressing gets hived off by the administrators and the technical staff. The commission has a mandate that's constitutional, whether you like it or not. And so the problem with GCOM now, the whole selection of staff, the imbalance in ethnic representation, the selection of the election day staff. How can we be a country that is multi-ethnic, multi-diverse, and your election staff of thousands is totally imbalanced? it can't be. And this is part of the problem, is not the commissioners themselves. I'm not saying that there are not issues at the commission, but the problems that lead to the issues, a lot of it is the way in which the GCOM is managed and the control. So the commission generally doesn't deal with hiring of election day staff.
Well, it's not supposed to.
The commissioners, that is, let's say.
Yes.
They're
They're supposed to deal with general issues
but they
of
do have
policy.
to set the policy.
Yes.
And so when it is that is said that when the point was raised about the ethnic imbalance in election day staff, the response of the then chairman was that one particular ethnic group didn't do well at the exams, and that was thought to be quite all right, when in fact it wasn't true. And so my thing is that if you deal with the issue of the three represented two parties, we could spend the next year or two fighting over that, and it would have no effect on whether the elections are tampered with, above board, or anything. The commission needs to, and the commissioners, and I believe that the members of the commissioners are in themselves honorable men and women on both sides, and that there's some general agreement on some issues, but that if the machinery down all the way to the poll station is not kept above board and the integrity of the machinery, the role of the commission is to protect the integrity of the electoral machinery. That's their job.
Yeah.
And so if you think that, okay, let's take away the three representatives each of each party, and we put civil people or people who are not aligned. I don't know where you find people in Guyana who aren't aligned, by the way.
I think there are, you know.
There are very few. There are very few. But if you do get...
Even if they're not, they're perceived to be.
Well, no, but because you know why.
You are
know
too,
why,
you
Bishop?
know.
But you know why. You must have heard this said. If you don't belong to a party, the political parties will assign you one.
Yes.
That's true. I mean, but the issue
But there
is...
are genuinely independent.
But I'll tell you something,
They are
though, even
noble, well-respected,
Yeah.
honorable Guyanese
Yes.
who, even if they have a political preference, they operate at a high level of principle
integrity.
Because they're
and
decent.
integrity. And I respect that because I believe that I know quite a lot of people in this country who are like that. But the issue here, and we must never run away from this discussion in Guyana, building trust is still something that we have to nurture. Because you could start out with the best people, but if mistrust and distrust is there, sooner or later you have some of the difficulties. And I believe what we from the PPPC is seeking, like for example, the leader of the opposition was called upon quite recently to fulfill his constitutional requirement of providing a list of 6 persons to the president for him to choose the chairman of the new
Right.
chairman of the Elections Commission. The leader of the opposition went beyond the constitutional mandate and
That's right.
consulted
It required consultation with the political
parties. He went
That's
beyond
right, yes.
the,
He did.
the
He did.
politicians, and he consulted with civil society.
Non-governmental political.
I sat through, if not all, most of those consultations. And I can tell you what Dr. Barajagio said to every group that came before him. We are not looking for a chairman that is pro-PPP. We are looking for a chairman that is decent, that is honest, that is brave, that could withstand pressure, that is impartial, that is fair, that will act justly in the interests of Guyana. Make your suggestions fitting that bill.
I mean, I do believe that there are also people who are politically aligned, who, given a job, have integrity and professionalism to be able to do it in that way. So I don't believe in the view, and maybe it's because I've been too long in politics, that because you are a politician, you're incapable of integrity
Yes.
and professionalism. I can't live with that. That's my whole life have been like that. But I do believe that if you're given a job and there's trust given to you as sitting on the commission as appointees of these people, you're still expected to act honorably and to protect the machinery, because the whole country is at stake if you
But
don't
Chris, if I
protect it.
make this point, I mean, maybe to Gail's embarrassment, but it might be a good embarrassment for the new year. In committees,
It's not unusual, by the way.
in committees of the parliament, every time we sit, we prevent the government from making major mistakes, being embarrassed, and making blunders, because we act responsibly by
Out of national interest.
national interest in the committees to make the corrections, to provide the drafts that would improve on what is taking place. So politics is not all just the cuss down, the shake down, the break down. There are people who in this country, and I say that because like Gail was making the point, particularly herself with the experience at the parliamentary level, is guilty of doing that. Sometimes I want to ask her, why are you doing the government's work? You're not
Yeah.
the,
Yes.
you're not
She's
the
always
presidential
telling me that.
you're not the presidential advisor anymore.
Just because I'm still drafting, I'm still correcting, and I'm still
Well, you know,
research.
You said some very kind things about civil society, and I think.
Remember, I came from there, right?
Exactly.
Both of you came from that.
And you know, I have appeared before select committees,
Yes.
and it struck me how
One of them I was cheering.
yes, in one of them you were cheering, indeed.
Yes.
It struck me how independently and professionally,
Yeah.
and impartially,
Yeah.
those events
Yeah,
are
yeah.
conducted.
Yeah.
Yet there is a feeling, and maybe you've been in politics long enough, Mr. Shearer. Why is it there is this feeling, and I think it's justified, that the PPP and the PNC, let's say the base parties, just don't have the national interest at heart. They're here about power, one replacing the other and getting their hands on
Well,
the levers of power.
they're involving competitive politics. And the competitive politics
With one,
is not
with
not
one
suppo-
overriding goal, national interest.
Yes, the competitive
must be.
competitive politics should operate on a platform that says we have the best ideas.
Ideas. You compete
for
on ideas.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
compete on ideas. From our side, I think we've always tried. I can't say we've always succeeded, but I would say sincerely we've always tried that in our debates, our discourse, our proposition or our opposition of a matter is about the idea, where it's good for Guyana. That is why I started when you spoke about how it feels to be on the opposition side. I went to an idea which was revolutionary for Guyana. And if you remember when the Amalia hydroelectricity program was advanced, President Jagdeo was gracious enough to say this was a dream of former President Burnham. He was not ashamed to say, this is not an original...
Upper Mazaruni Hydro.
it is not an idea that I, Barra Jagdeo, have slept and dreamt, or from some caucus at Freedom House we have concocted. This has been a dream of Guyana for decades. Our former president talked about this. And all that I'm doing is what is good for Guyana. That was an opportunity for us to rally around. Then if we could remember, Chris, and you would have participated in National Development Strategy, which we need to have a reworked program, because what we're seeing now in the form of budget presentations and projects are haphazard, ad hocism. Ad hocism seems to be the doctrine that is governing our country, which is sadly lacking where strategic ideas and strategic planning is concerned. But if we get that national development strategy was all embracing, it was a buy-in from civil society and all players. So no matter who won an election, you had a document that says these are the dreams of Guyana, whether it was the Deepwater Harbor, whether it was the linkage with Brazil, the road from Lethem to Linden, the Takatu Bridge, where it was about getting the bridge.
Governance as well. It
Yes.
wasn't just about physical things.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
But getting the country going in a real way, ensuring safety for all of our people, ensuring that our productive sectors, even diversification of the economy, to ensure that we could stand external shocks as it relates to expanding the core of our economy to make it broader. So when you have these things as a consensus, it is easier to operate. And competitive politics is not about just what will be done, but is the implementation. And I think that point that you were making just now about the PNC and the PPP seems to be at each other. Yes, competitive politics, you have to get your people, you have to get your support and the rest of it. But the maturity is, at the end of an election, is where you find the real statesmanship actions that need to take. When the election is over, you're not president for PPP or president for PNC. You're president for all the people
So you don't
of
need
Guyana.
to brand Guyana, Chris.
Your symbol is no longer your party symbol. Your symbol is now Guyana. When you speak to Guyana. When you travel overseas at international levels, you're not speaking for the PPP or the PNC, you're speaking for Guyana. That is why, even with the Venezuela border issue, the PPP was forced to the stump to say, look, we are in full support. We will stand to defend sovereignty of our nation. The Honorable Gail Teixeira participated in engagements with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to ensure that the opposition's view is there in full support that we are sending the right signal to Venezuela. Guyana might have competitive politics between these parties, but as a country, we're standing together. That is why we were so disappointed and hurt about our Jubilee celebrations, the exclusion, the lack of embrace that, and I have described it in another program, Chris, that it was a year of missed opportunities and unmet expectations. I think the Guyanese people wanted much more, and I'm hoping that in 2017 we will be able to see much more of that happening. So it's not just about elections. Elections is a necessary process to determine who will hold the reins of executive power.
Who will carry the responsibility? Because that's what it really is. It's a responsibility in the burden.
Yes,
absolutely.
and remember, you're being reviewed. Your performance is being reviewed. And that is why GCOM is so important, what we were talking about. Because if you're going to write the test, it must be objective when you're being scored, that the correct results is being made known, and the will of the Guyanese people is made known, and it's not subverted by any other force except the will of the people. Whether it's through manipulation electronically, whether it's through influences of external forces, whether it's through administrative omissions, all of that must take backseat. We must have a system that is foolproof, that when we are finished with the exchange of ideas and we are finished our discussions on television and the village corners and the rest of it, the Guyanese people quietly go to a polling station with mechanisms that are in place that produces results that at the end of it, Guyana holds together and we continue our march towards prosperity.
One of the things,
Sure.
Chris, is not to I know because you want to go on to other things, but
We can continue next week if
but one of the
you're
things
available.
I want to say is that, you know what is the difference post-2011 and prior? Between 1992 and on, and even though we had very rough times, we had the crime wave and all these things, and even with post-97, when you had the violence and you had the constitutional reform, there was always, and I'm saying this with a lot of experience, that there was always the opportunity for us in government to have people contact people in the opposition at high levels. Gav, have a cup of coffee. Keep the doors open. Try to get the leaders to meet each other, even at times when things look pretty rough. And those discourses, and I have been privileged as a politician to have been in all sorts of talks between political parties from 1978 to up to 2014. However, what happened after 2011 is a distinct break, because I could say that under former President White, former leader of the opposition, Mr. Corbyn, Mr. Jagdeo as president, Mr. Dr. Chetty Jagan as president, there was always opportunities to talk, and they talked. And there's some very interesting and very funny and comical stories that have to be written about the kind of rapport between like Jagdeo and Hoyt, and very, very, not for the usual thing with politicians, but a certain deference and respect for each other that's really interesting and breaks down the myths of these two blocks want to strangle each other. 2011, post-2011 election, something very important begins to change in our political culture, and the behavior between of the APNU AFC as the new, two combined parties. They're not at that time a coalition. And quite naively, I believe, in post-2011, we felt, okay, we've got this, they have one seat more than us if it's combined.
Yes.
Let's meet. And President Ramachar, the first thing he did on being inaugurated was inviting and meeting with Mr. Granger and his team and the AFC and so on. And the talks went on. And it never got anywhere, never got traction. It was always about, we were confronted with take it or leave it. And I use that phrase not because it's been used recently, but when I saw it the other day when the contractors were told, take it or leave it to do with Durban Park, it made me remember those days in 2012 when we sat down with the then opposition on the budget of 2012, right? And the range of things. So that what happened after 2011 was a decisive change in the modus vivendi of how the PNC and how the PPP engaged. And there was this fracture where the new combined forces came into meetings to meet the government, the PPPC, and said, here's what we want. And we'd say, we'll start doing our usual PPP thing is let's, we're politicians, so you kind of negotiate, you're trying to mediate, you give someone something, you take something. And there was this wall up that said, this is what we want, you either give it or that's it. And so regrettably, Chris, in retrospect, looking back, that has become the modus vivendi of the government in office now. No negotiations. When Mr. Granger the president invited Mr. Jagdev, the opposition, to meet him the first time, if my memory is right, is December 2015. And one of the issues was the border issue. And we immediately gave our support. It would be unthinkable for the PPP not to do that.
But Chris, if I make a point.
And that's how we got the involvement of name someone from your party to meet with Mr. Greenwich, with his team and the UN team from time to time. And that has continued up to recently. Greenwich will keep me informed about, Mr. Greenwich will keep me informed what's happening with Ban Ki-moon or whatever. And I relate to my party and the leader of the opposition. On that one issue, the old style of how we related to each other's political parties has somewhat been maintained, but no other place.
But I wanted to make this point, following up on Comrade Gail, in terms of those negotiations. I want to look at three issues that really captured Guyana and stalled us for a while.
Yeah.
The anti-money laundering and the Conquering of the Finance of Terrorism Amendment Bill, the Public Procurement Commission, and the environmental tax. There were three major issues. The Public Procurement Commission was installed now, largely, not solely, largely because of the magnanimity of the PPPC, who now chairs the
Public
Accounts Committee.
Right.
We agreed to 2, you take 3.
Which, by the way, was the original formula when we were in government and the PNC was in opposition.
So we went ahead and did that.
Since, what was it, 2003,
2003.
2004.
Yeah.
That was between Murray and our General Secretary then, Ramatar.
So
split 3-2.
So we now have a Public Accounts Committee. A
Public Procurement
Procurement Commission. Today, Cabinet offered no objection for $1 billion of contracts in total violation of the Public Procurement Act. Because the adjustments at 54, I think is 6, is that from the time of the establishment of the Public Procurement, it falls away. Cabinet role falls away.
Yeah.
Why is Cabinet still involved in public procurement? No objection of contracts up until now. Now, all kinds of fancy explanations could be given, but the law is the law.
Absolutely.
Number 2.
But why tolerate it? If you want to be an effective opposition.
We are opposing it, and we will do things to oppose it. Just watch as it plays out.
But the
I want to show you now about the environmental tax.
Yes,
but the chairman of the PP says we're going to wean the government off of it.
That's absolute. That's nothing in the law.
Environmental tax. We stood to have to pay compensation to a foreign company that was importing beverages because we had a tax that was deemed by the Treaty of Chaguaramas, when you examine it, as discriminatory.
The PPP admitted that.
We admitted that.
You admitted that at COTED. At COTED,
not
you
only
admitted
at
that.
COTED, we went to the National Assembly.
Yes, later on, though.
We went to the National
Much too
Assembly.
late, Bishop.
We went to the National Assembly and sought to remedy that by bringing legislation that will remove the tax from being $10 for containers.
imports only, the $5
So
around.
$5 across the board. The APNU AFC combined voted against that, defeated it twice.
Except Bishop, you were the executive and you could have stopped collecting the tax at any time.
But listen to this, Chris.
You accept that?
Yes. This is the point. We said let's make it revenue neutral and bring it to the locals as well as the
Yes.
and deal
At
with
$5.
the environmental issue, recyclable, you get the refunds and all the rest of it. The very same thing that the APNU AFC defeated twice, they have now brought back in budget 2017. But this time they're charging $10 for the imports and $10 to the local manufacturers. How could you describe that? The anti-money laundering and the countering of the financing of the terrorism amendment bill, negotiations again, we're talking through the select committee as well as at the political level at the office of the president.
Yeah.
All kinds of demands. Listen, a 20-person anti-money laundering authorities to be established, not one person in place up until now. You have to have 4 people hired by the parliamentary committee of appointments, director, deputy director, accountant, lawyer,
Yes.
and all the rest of it, all kinds of demands. You know what has happened so far? 2 people have been hired, the director and the deputy director. There is no anti-money laundering authority.
That's correct.
There is no lawyer. There is no accountant. Now, you're the ones, while you were in opposition, that demanded all of these things, these raft of measures, in order to give your support to Guyana's progress and development. Some of these things were tied to Amalia and all other things that were coming on board. And then when you're in government, you're not doing any of the things that you said you will do. How do you judge that?
Is it only the political party at fault here, particularly on the environmental tax? Because Banks DIH was the one, and DDL, they were the ones who opposed any form of compromise on this matter. And now they oppose the $5, and now they've got to pay $10.
Well, everybody learns.
What does that say about our business community now?
No, but I mean, just as you talk about politicians, the businessmen have their own,
And women.
and women have their own way in which they think and the way they make profit and stuff like that. Lawyers too, professionals too. I mean, each one has their sphere in which they operate and stuff like that. The business community then thought that this would have been disastrous for them. Regrettably, the medicine they have to take now is much worse. But they're not as... We are hoping that the business community too recognizes not just the $10. Each of these bills, which you're familiar with, is huge bureaucracies, which means they're going to be hiring a lot of people. But
Record keeping.
And tracking down and enforcement. But we consciously, when we dealt with that whole issue, in the beginning, was that we recognized Guyana had to have a manufacturing sector. It had to develop. And Treaty of Chaguaramas was amended, I think, subsequently after that. And we didn't catch up with the times, but nobody was complaining. So let's try and get our guys a kickstart. It was, one could say, opportunistic, but I am prepared as a politician that if that gives our business people a kickstart and get them going, fine. But obviously, when we went to the National Assembly and said, look, we need to do this, we had over-the-counter talks, not just on the floor of the House, to explain how critical this was. And to defeat it twice, for what reason? This...
Politics.
It was... No,
But we turned around.
But no, it
and
wasn't
we paid,
politics, because...
And we turned around and paid the company that carried us to court at the CCJ, who was prepared to accept certain terms and conditions had we gotten the legislation passed. We defeated the legislation, exposed the country, and since they are in government, they have started paying out the award of the CCJ to Rhodesia.
Without collecting the
Without
taxes.
collecting the taxes that Rhodesia should have paid to GRE when it's supposed to have been a set-off.
But I come back to this point. The PPP could have said we are going to cease this tax, even if it didn't get the parliamentary approval. It could have, as an executive decision.
I am not sure about that, and I wouldn't
Well,
argue
it
that
was the
from a
law.
legal point of view.
It would have remained the law because the law was not amended. But I don't know that the Commissioner General could disobey the law.
Well, now,
I leave those for the lawyers to have a good debate on that one, because
we talked of lots of the noblesse of the politicians and civil society. The end of last year and the beginning of this year, there wasn't a lot of nobility about the relationships and the conduct of politicians, government side, the opposition side, and two particular events and issues were really jarring. The budget.
We could think of many, but you tell us what your two
Budget
are.
2017 and the Red House
Yeah.
lease and the fiasco with a minister going and leading a band of people that hold down a signboard.
My conflict management training would instruct me that when decisions are made, you must ask yourself, what is the fuel tank? What is the driver? What is the thinking? I think with the Red House issue in the first place, this administration needed a detraction, something to detract from the flagging that they were taking from their own supporters. And I think their instincts, ill-advised as it was, attack your opponent, a symbol that they all rally around, not knowing that their own supporters were torn against them further, because nationalism and pride fills Guyanese even though we have political preferences. And if you look at social media and the commentary on Red House, it's not just PPP, PPPC type people that are condemning this action. Even people who say they supported the APNU and are known supporters of the APNU are against this action, saying you've got to observe the rule of law. The rule of law.
But there is also the same dichotomy, and you would know that word very much, Mr. Teixeira. Dichotomy.
Yeah.
Chedi used to love that word.
Yes.
That said, whilst the conduct of the Minister of Social Protection was indefensible and bad, the conduct of the President was bad. The secret deal that the PPP had signed with the Chedi Jagan Research
I don't know
Center.
that was a secret deal, Christopher. Huh?
It was
Well,
I don't know that was a secret deal.
Well-
Why are we trying to make it a secret deal?
Well,
It might
lo-
not, the terms and conditions of the arrangement might find some level of discomfort with people, but it was not a secret arrangement.
Those-
It wasn't a backhand deal.
But
the
let's-
public, in terms of the 999 lease,
You know.
and I don't want to get, I don't want to tread
no,
on
I
the
don't
legal
want to get
issues.
into the law, but I want to do some precedents.
Sure.
You know, when and this is not meant disrespectful to anybody who supports the PNC. When President Burnham died, the mausoleum was built with government money in the botanical gardens. It has been maintained by the government in the botanical gardens. Taxpayers pay for that. Nobody in the PVP has ever dared to say, publicly or otherwise, that why we keep maintaining, keep it clean. We have cleaners there and stuff like that. When we have never shown disrespect to our former presidents, President John, President Hoyt, President Burnham. There was a big political thing, nevertheless, when Burnham died, and the mausoleum was constructed for President Burnham, where they go every year for the anniversary and stuff
Yes.
like that. President Hoyt is in the what do you call it, the
Seven
seven
Ponds.
ponds. There has never been a view of being disrespectful. The Chedi Jagan Research Center has a lot of emotional attachment for the PPP. And that is because when Chedi was premier, that's where he lived. And some people have to explain to young people, it wasn't painted red because we lived there. It was always red.
Yes.
It was always red. It wasn't red because it was PPP. And so the emotional, sentimental attachment to the place. The Chedi Jagan Research Center has been there for long years. When we celebrated, two important celebrations took place in Parliament, an example of the way in which we worked before. There was a motion we brought on Chedi Jagan's anniversary as a parliamentarian. Lance Carberry, on behalf of the PNC, and myself, on behalf of the PEP, negotiated because they thought that they didn't want to support it as written. It was a little bit too PPP-ish. And so Lance and I sat and worked it out and got language that both sides could live with. And of course, both sides, we should have changed our word Gail, and the same thing to Lance. But the motion went through and was unanimously supported. And that was about the president's, what do you call the portraits and doing all these things. Next year was Burnham's anniversary of being a parliamentarian for X years. Lance came to me and the PNC came to me and said, we have a motion. We said, okay, do it again. Sat down, went through, cleared up. What we found, that we could live with, go back and negotiate with our sides. The motion went to Parliament. Passed unanimously. Can you imagine?
Is that on the same scale as Red House?
Okay, no, I'm coming to that.
Sure.
Because in that motion was the issue of having places for presidents, of the collection of presidents, the collections of presidents, their artifacts, their presidential gifts and stuff like that. That's not what Red House is about. Red House is not the place where the gifts were all left at State House and wherever. So that what I'm saying is that the PNC was in office for a long time. Burnham died in 1985. Hoyt died in 2003. At no point in any of the dialogues that took place did the PNC ever say, look, man, we want a building to put up a museum for Burnham or a museum for Hoyt. If they had done that, I don't think the PPP would have blocked them. When that motion was, the two motions were passed with Chetty and Burnham, after that, I said to my cabinet, well, we've agreed to a motion. It looks as if we'll have to find places for the Hoyt collection, the Burnham collection, and so on. Again, no follow-up. So, no, we as a government, Chetty Jagan is a father of this nation. He's one of the leaders of this nation. The fact that he's PPP is an asset to this country. But he is still, nevertheless, Chetty Jagan, who charted a certain course for this country. And therefore, I don't want to get into lease and anything else. And I think the majority of decent-minded people are not offended about the lease and so on. They're offended about the disrespect, the lack of decency that was used by the number one person of this country with many of their supporters.
Let me ask you this.
And that is the issue.
We only have just 1 minute left.
Yeah. Yes, I know.
But do you think that the PPP may have erred in not opening similar facilities for all the previous presidents?
My view is this. Civil society, and you know this well, the role of civil society many times is to lobby. Why didn't the PNC lobby at any time for the government?
No, but my question is, would the PPP have not helped its own cause in this matter?
You're saying that we should have initiated.
Yes.
In retrospect, you can look at many things in retrospect. But if we had said to the PNC in government, and if we say today, Red House should remain as it is, and we're seeing the behavior of the PNC. And so I don't think the onus is on us at all. The onus is on the fact that Chetty Jagan and the respect for our former leaders. We have not in any way disrespected the mausoleum, the pond, and other kind of attributes and historical places where those former presidents were. And we do not expect the same in relation to Chetty Jagan.
Ms. Gail Teixeira, I'm sorry we have run out of time. I want to thank both of you, Bishop Edgill, Ms. Teixeira. Thank you so much for
You're welcome.
For sharing your time on Plain Talk. It's been very useful. I hope this is a start of a series of conversations we can have on national issues from a national perspective, albeit with your own stance and slants.
Yeah.
But we really do appreciate it. I do want to say, operators and viewers, thank you. Good night.
Thank you
Look
very
forward
much.
to seeing you next week.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thanks for having us.